Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about DeciDoTell. All right. So DeciDoTell is a neologism that captures an important piece of professional advice that was given to me by a boss well over 10 years ago, which I think is fundamentally important for people to understand in today's work environment. So DeciDoTell is a neologism that captures this entire professional technique that I will now explain to you. And also, I am a history buff, and as I have continued to learn history, I have seen people who have failed at DeciDoTell. And so I'm going to give historical examples of people who failed to use the DeciDoTell technique and then paid a very high price for that failure to do DeciDoTell. All right, so DeciDoTell, not only is it a neologism, it is also a mnemonic to help you understand, help you remember the technique. So first, I do want to spell it real quick. DeciDoTell. By the way, it is a noun and a verb, right? Don't forget to DeciDoTell, right? And also, so here's how it's spelled: capital D, E-C-I, capital D, O, capital T, E-L-L. DeciDoTell. Okay? All right. So, what is DeciDoTell? Well, my boss told this to me a long time ago. This is a boss I had before my current boss, several bosses ago. He's a very interesting man, and he was a very successful executive. Okay, and here's what he said. And when he told it to me, I thought it was one of the most foolish things I had ever heard. Every day of my career going forward, I've learned he was 100% right. So here's what he said. He said, spend 1/3 of your time deciding what you're going to do. Spend 1/3 of your time doing what you decided to do. And spend 1/3 of your time telling people what you did. And I was like, what? Wait, what? That's crazy. I'm not going to spend 1/3 of my time telling people what I did. And I'm not going to spend 1/3 of my time deciding what to do. All right, now I want to make a caveat here, okay? If you work an hourly job, do not employ DeciDoTell. DeciDoTell is a professional technique that is used for people who are salaried, people who are in charge of teams, people who are in charge of products, people who are in charge of projects. And so basically, this is for jobs where you have agency and you have independence, right? So if you don't have those in your current job, continue to work hard at those, excel at that hourly job, get a salary job. And then when you are in a position where you have agency, where you're in charge of your own time management, you're deciding what tasks need to get done in order to accomplish a goal, immediately implement DeciDoTell. Okay. All right. So I thought this was crazy, but I really have learned he was absolutely right. If you don't spend 1/3 of your time deciding what you're going to do, you end up doing things that you shouldn't have done. I worked on a project where this happened. I worked on a project for like 2.5 months. Hundreds of hours were spent on it. And what we didn't know was that another tool had been chosen for this project, and all the work was thrown out. Okay, so that was an issue where the decision part was failed. Okay. Doing is obvious. If you don't do, then nothing gets done, and it doesn't matter how much you decide or how much you tell, you have to do, okay? So you should definitely spend 1/3 of your time doing. That's the obvious one. Telling. We live in a world where if you don't tell people what you did, somebody else is going to take credit for it, or it is not going to be accredited to you, and someone else will reap the benefit, okay? So it's critical. All right, so let's talk about historical examples of each one of these where I believe that DeciDoTell is actually borne out and shown through history, okay? So the first one is Samuel P. Langley, all right? Now, Samuel P. Langley was an American competitor for the Wright brothers, right? Now, Samuel P. Langley was a very, very famous, very talented engineer, okay? And the government identified him and said, hey, you are the guy who's going to take America into the age of flight, right? And so they gave Samuel P. Langley millions of dollars. They gave him facilities. They gave him attention. They gave him authority to take America into the age of flight. Okay? All of the newspapers of the day followed Samuel P. Langley around and were waiting for him to deliver Flight to America, right? Now, here's what he did. Samuel P. Langley worked very hard on building essentially model airplanes that would, prove out the ability to fly, okay? He also then very cautiously, tested some actual flying vehicles with people in it, like over rivers and things like that. And it was really, just not. So he did do the work, right? And man, I will tell you, he took every interview he could with these newspapers, telling people what he was going to do. But what he didn't do was he didn't make the right decision on how to do the work. So the Wright brothers were like, hey, what we're going to decide to do is we're going to keep working on this every day, and we're going to test flying, not models. We're going to test actual flying machines day after day, and we're going to do it ourselves over fields, which was incredibly dangerous, all right? And there was a lot of, injury and basically there was a lot of risk employed by the Wright brothers, okay? And so they decided to be more aggressive in how they worked than Samuel P. Langley. And I honestly believe that Samuel P. Langley would have landed exactly where the Wright brothers did, but his decisions to be cautious cost him the title of being the man who created man-made flight, right? And the Wright brothers have that moniker to this very day, right? So the creators of human flight, which is huge, right? So Samuel P. Langley is someone who failed at the decide stage. Okay. All right. Let's talk about Gutzon Borglum. Gutzon Borglum is the man who was in charge of, he actually was the creator of the Mount Rushmore Monument. Very, very interesting, okay? Now, he did very good at deciding, and he did very good at telling, okay? But he did do a good job at doing. All right, so the Mount Rushmore Monument, a lot of people say, hey, that's kind of a weird monument. Why is it just a bunch of heads on top of a mountain? And why is there a whole bunch of debris at the bottom, right? Well, the reality is that monument was essentially abandoned, right? So what happened was Gutzon Borglum, he got a lot of money from the government, from both the state government and from the federal government to begin this massive monument, right? So he started carving all these heads out of the mountain. And he decided that which mountain to choose, right? And he made a mountain that would have allowed all those presidents to be carved at scale, right, in the mountain from head to foot, right? So he made the right decision, right? And he was very vocal. He told everybody what he's planning and where he was heading, right? So he did not fail in telling people the scope of what he was planning, how awesome it was going to be for everybody, right? But essentially, one of the things he decided also was that he was going to put a museum in the head of each of those presidents, and that he would also carve every president from head to foot, all the way down, right? And, and so he was always, and so once he had decided that, he was trying to get money for this grand effort, right? And, but what ended up happening was he ended up dying before he could complete it, right? And so all he had done were the heads. And so now the heads are there on Mount Rushmore, and it looks kind of odd because, like I said, all the debris is just right at the bottom. It looks a little sloppy, right? So Gutzon Borglum succeeded at deciding, succeeded at telling, but failed at the doing, all right? All right, next is telling. I just want to tell you about somebody who failed at the telling part. And the person who failed at the telling part is actually a couple of brothers. It is Richard and Maurice MacDonald, okay? And they are the creators of McDonald's, right? So, which is the most successful fast food restaurant in the history of the world, okay? All right, so they have, a massive amount of, they've sold billions of hamburgers, and they really revolutionized the way food is distributed all over the world. I don't think there's a continent in the world that doesn't have 50 plus, and some of them have thousands of fast food restaurants, right? So now the Richard and Maurice McDonald, they created all that, right? They decided what would be a good, solid structure to create a restaurant that made a good burger, did it at a reasonable price, did it at high consistency, okay? And then they did it. They worked really hard, and they created the McDonald's model, right? But that's it. That's all they did. They kept it small. They didn't really see the scope of what they could accomplish, right? And then Ray Kroc came along, and nowadays, if you say, who created McDonald's, you are far more likely to hear Ray Kroc than Richard or Maurice McDonald, right? And the reason why is Ray Kroc was a promoter, right? And he told the whole world about McDonald's. And he said, this is the model, right? And he spread it like with a banner, man. He just carried that banner into modern day. And he really, showed people what could be done with fast food and how McDonald's was the best food model that had ever been developed anywhere by anyone, right? And so Ray Kroc was a master at telling. And I think Ray Kroc is an incredibly important lesson, right? So here's the issue. I really feel this is true. You should not break these ratios, right? Now, of course, throughout your work, there might be times where you go as high as 80% doing and 10% on the others. But you can't do that at a sustained pace. You need to be very careful about what you decide to do. You need to be very careful to work hard and do it. And you need to tell people. That last part is the one that I think most people fail at. And that is the difference between a manager or an executive, between a industry rock star. They tell people what they did constantly. And it is a hard fact of life that while we would all like to believe that you can decide what you're going to do, that you can do the work and everything's going to turn out fine, and that you don't actually need to be diligent and tell people that people will understand that you did the work, that's just not true. You really need to tell people that you've done the work, okay? All right, so that is DeciDoTell. And it is very important that you actually take the time to follow it, because when I first heard it, I thought it was a terrible, terrible idea. But I truly believe for modern work, for today's modern professional environment, DeciDoTell is absolutely critical, and it can really move you forward to a successful career. All right, take care.